Welcome to the Qualified Tutor podcast. I'm your host, Ludo Miller, and I'll be interviewing tutors and thought leaders from across the tutoring landscape to inspire, inform, and motivate you to become the best tutor you can be. The Qualified Tutor community is a safe and supportive space for tutors who love to learn and grow. We offer training, resources, ideas, and a chance to connect with like-minded tutors. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join our Qualified Tutor community at www.qualifiedtutorcommunity.org or find it in the show notes. Welcome to our next episode of the Qualified Tutor podcast. Today we are joined by Eli Baigel, who is a Teach First teacher, has been since the program started last summer, but more importantly, he is one of the wonderful course alumni of our Qualification for Tutors. Eli was on the first cohort we had, and you will have heard his voice before on one of our previous episodes where we spoke with the Qualified Tutor graduates. We've been very impressed and grateful to Eli for providing the insights that he's built up over his education and into his Teach First program. And we are really looking forward today to talking about the role of the teacher and the role of the tutor, as this is something that Eli covers. So Eli, welcome to the Qualified Tutor podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. It's a strange time, of course, and the whole Qualified Tutor course that we ran and the cohorts that we've had so far have all been since lockdown began. So we feel that lockdown is kind of our business normal, but obviously a lot has changed for you.
Certainly, a lot has changed for me. There's been a big move to online teaching, trying to get students to engage with online learning has definitely been a challenge, a fun challenge at times, but sometimes a quite painstaking task.
Yeah,
I'm sure you can imagine.
Yeah. So what do you think the biggest challenges since lockdown has begun have been?
I think the biggest challenge really is about finding that productivity every day and kind of telling yourself to get online and maybe and engage with students through the screen. It can sometimes feel quite strange that you don't have that face-to-face interaction. But I think it's really important to realize that even though it's behind a screen, the teaching is still taking place. And we might have to innovate the ways we teach in order to really get the results that we want from the students during this difficult time.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, isn't it? Really, is that despite all the issues that have arisen, that there is still a whole amount of teaching going on. And we've heard recently the announcement of the national tutoring program and how that's been rolled out in order to allow students to kind of, in their words, to catch up on the learning that they've missed. But we feel that it's more about giving students that learning that they've missed, and kind of finding that love for learning again that really best happens in a face-to-face environment. But so Eli, I imagine a lot has changed for you, and this being your first year of the Teach First environment, this is probably one of the Teach First cohorts that has been most affected, really. So well done for dealing with that.
Yes, I never expected a global pandemic at the start of this year, I can tell you that.
No, and then maybe I won't make you give us an answer here, but maybe your choice of path would have been different if you'd known that this was coming. But
possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly.
So Eli, we'd love to start with this question. I'm sure if as a listener of the QT podcast before that you've heard this question, but what kind of student were you, Eli, and did you or have you ever had a tutor?
Yeah, so as a student, I feel like I was probably slightly annoying, actually. I was really, really chatty, but not quite disruptive enough to actually warrant being sent out of a classroom. So I was that sort of student in the middle who's a low-level disruptor.
That's a new phrase. I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah, it's a big buzzword that's used in teaching to describe students that were a bit like me, I suppose. But it's interesting to read now about ways that teachers try and manage this type of behavior in the classroom. And I was suddenly realizing all the ways that my teachers actually were managing my behavior when I was back at school. So it feels almost like I had fallen for all the teachers' tricks.
Yeah. So do you think that shapes kind of how your style of teaching, as a teacher now?
Yeah, definitely. I think it really makes you think how much teaching, just to go further on the tricks analogy, it's almost kind of like being a magician in a way. You're not necessarily pulling rabbits outside of hats, but you're constantly having to divert the attention away from disruptive behaviors in order to make sure that learners are always on track, in order for the magic of the classroom to take place.
Yeah, well, that really is a good analogy there, isn't it? That you're able to tie those 2 points back together. But so I guess, going off that point, that's one of the other beauties of the tutoring environment, isn't it? Is that you're not having to deal with that classroom management, that aspect of dealing with 30 kids at once. You're able to channel that attention, that focus on one student. So even if there is disruption there, you can work that into your sessions. Is that something that you found with your tutoring sessions?
Definitely. I think one-to-one tutoring, really allows a more tailored approach. So there's less time spent thinking about all the ways in which you can divert the attention away from other students, and there's more time actually just spent with that one student and really listening to their needs and really attending to those needs. So there's tons of research that you could read that would all state that actually one-to-one tuition really actually has the most impact in terms of attainment for students.
Yeah, I think that's something that we definitely live by, and that's research that has been very widely covered and very widely kind of peer reviewed, and really is such an important factor when thinking about classrooms falling behind and students falling behind and catch up programs. It's really that one-to-one tuition has been seen to have a seriously large effect compared to other forms of content delivery and of teaching. So I guess that's an incredibly very important aspect to keep in mind. But what we were talking about this really kind of earlier, Eli, but how do you think, or what do you think the role of the teacher has become in this period of lockdown? Do you think there's been a change to what is expected of the teacher?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, actually. There definitely has to be there had to be a pretty big shift in the way in which we think about teaching since lockdown began. I think in some ways a lot of education is still imbued with this idea that teaching online is almost secondary to any other teaching, and it's almost something which won't yield the same results. And I think that's something we've really had to change our perspective about. We've really had to kind of look at new methods of engaging students online. We've really had to kind of look at how we can actually use data online to inform our practice, which is things that in the past we maybe actually let take a backseat, but now they've actually they're the driving force of of learning during coronavirus.
Yeah, and they've had to be, haven't they? They've come, that rise in technology and ed tech that's so widely discussed has been accelerated, and that's perhaps not a bad thing at all. The systems were ready to be implemented, and coronavirus has forced them to be so. But I want to go a little deeper on that. What systems kind of data management are you talking about? How can we enhance that online learning environment for students?
Yes, so we mainly use at school Google Classroom, which at first is a system which can appear quite intimidating to, I suppose, people who are quite scared of technology. I think I fall under that bracket, slightly grandpa-y in that respect. But I think after receiving we've had quite a few CPD sessions on how to use Google Classroom effectively, and it is incredible the amount of data you can yield from Google Classroom. I mean, there's whole reports for every student based on the assessments they've done. You can have like real quantitative data that you could then look at and see exactly where students are falling behind, which topics need to be addressed. And I think that's something which, if it did happen before, it would have taken painstaking hours, hunched over a laptop with Excel. Now it can be done in 2 minutes online. I think that's a really, really important resource for teachers.
Yeah, it's about streamlining the process, isn't it? It's about making sure that the teacher's time is spent most effectively on planning those sessions and coming up with really creative ways to keep students engaged, not on laborious reports or attending to children's kind of students' assessments, attending on the admin inside of those assessments. So I think you've picked up really nicely on kind of how EdTech has not only allowed us to deliver or continue to deliver while we're not in the classroom, but also how actually looking further afield it can be implemented long term to improve the learning environment. I was picking up on a point there that you mentioned about CPD and about how actually we should constantly be looking in the education sphere, as in so many other industries, for CPD. It seems to be that people think that tutors and educators, there seems to be a lack of CPD there, and perhaps that's because of the traditional setup of this sector, and perhaps it's to do with the fact that tutors have never been seen as a profession that requires continuous development, because it's something that's seen as a sort of short-term gap, both for students and for the tutors themselves. But what do you think, Eli, are the benefits of professional development in tutoring?
Yes. So recently, I've seen there's been a massive increase in the amount of free CPD sessions, whether that be for tutoring, whether that be for teaching or leadership roles in schools. I think it's so key to use these sessions because they really allow for better quality teaching. And I'm actually really privileged to be part of the Teach First program, and so much of the program is based on the constant state of learning and constantly using new CPD in your classroom practice. There's always more to learn, that kind of philosophy. So I would really urge everyone to go to all the free CPDs that are on offer while they're still free during this period. There's so many things that you can take away from them. And also, I think, even though some of the CPD sessions and some of the professional development do offer quite radical techniques, new ideas that you might not have thought of, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to constantly reinvent the wheel and reinvent the way you're teaching with a totally new technique or something you've learned in that last session you went to. But you can use those opportunities to kind of pick out techniques which work for you, work out, do they fit with my teaching persona? And if not, then that's fine. Find a different one. And if they do fit, then definitely use it in your classroom practice.
Yeah, and make sure that you are constantly evolving, so that if the new tactic or the new technique that you've learned, if it is something that is, that you pick up as a really useful tool for a particular session, and then you use it in a session and it doesn't quite work, then don't keep plugging away with that. Make sure that you're kind of make yourself an agile and you make yourself a flexible educator. I think that is something that we've really tried to put across in our courses, is that we are providing these tutors and teachers and aspiring tutors that we have had on our course so far. We are giving them the tools to become better educators, and we're not saying that there is no skills there to begin with. We're not saying that the participants of our course are arriving with nothing, but we are just supplementing what our participants already have with more useful techniques or a deeper understanding of the pedagogy behind it. And Ellie, what you've brought so fantastically to the course is a real understanding of that already. So you've allowed, you have given us another avenue through which our participants learn, because they are able to learn from other participants in the course. And I think that's been a really positive aspect of these courses, is that peer-to-peer support. So have you been able to kind of implement any of the tools or techniques that you've learned over the course of the 4 weeks into your own tutoring, or is there something that you feel that you've transferred across from one to the other?
Yeah, so I think there was one particular part of the course which I felt would not only suit my tutor sessions, but also actually suit a classroom environment as well. So that was really helpful. It was the 5-step plan. So this is something which explicitly lays out the process that is needed to teach an effective lesson. So it's the idea that you come to each tutor session or each lesson fully prepared with allocated timings. You've got planned assessment for learning opportunities inbuilt within your actual tutor lesson plan. I think that is so important, because it's so easy to sometimes turn up to a lesson and think you have it planned, but you haven't really got assessment for learning at each stage of the lesson, at each learning point. And I think the 5-step plan which you have provided for Qualified Tutor really allows that assessment for learning to take place at each learning point.
Yeah, I think it was. It's amazing for giving an outline, a framework of how to tutor, but also what it scales as part of it. Within its scope, it allows you actually to use that every single time. And it allows you to use that even as the most expert tutor. You can still use this structure to base your lesson. So it really provides for all levels of tutor ability and of your students' age and ability and level. So I think that that's really been another part of the courses, and something that we've established as a foundation of this course, is that it's not specific to any one area of tutoring or one level of tutoring. It's for all learners, and all levels of tutoring ability so far have really been included. We've had people who've never tutored before. We've had people who've tutored a number of hours before. We've had those more down teaching, like yourself and like Evie, and I think we've managed to kind of incorporate that nicely, and I think that's really one of the positives. But Ellie, sort of just taking a step back, I guess, what do you think inspired you to get into education? If there are listeners of ours who are thinking of going down the same kind of routes that you have, and are wondering whether that would be the right route, what do you think it was that inspired you to go down this route of education and specifically kind of teaching and tutoring?
Yes, that's a really interesting question, because I actually think one of the main reasons I started teaching was because of an English tutor I had in school. I'm sure you'll be glad to hear that it was actually a tutor that allowed me to take this decision rather than a teacher. I think she really developed my love of learning, which is something I didn't actually necessarily have in the classroom. I was quite apathetic at school, really, actually, when it came to academia and my GCSEs and things. I didn't really think much about it. But this tutor really promoted this idea that learning is not just about getting those results, but it's about constantly going back to what we mentioned before, constantly being in that state of learning. And I think that's something which not only as a student I try to encompass, but also as a teacher, I think it's essential. So that was one of the reasons I chose to become a teacher. The other was I was in university when I came across some quite frankly shocking statistics regarding education inequality in the UK, and I was quite surprised to see that such a developed country still has huge issues in terms of its educational gap, and it's sadly growing because of the COVID pandemic. And I felt that I really wanted to get involved in some way in order to provide classroom experience for other students that my teachers were able to provide for me. So I think Teach First really spoke to me on that level, in that its whole mission statement is about tackling the education inequality in the UK. And today its mission statement is extremely important, in that the educational inequality gap has actually been exacerbated also because of the new digital divide. So the idea that students may not have access to the laptops or to the internet in order to complete the digital lessons. So I thought I could just provide you with a pretty shocking statistic that the Education Endowment Foundation found that between 2011 and 2019, the attainment gap in primary schools had actually narrowed. So that was a good progress. However, recently, due to COVID-19, the gap could potentially increase from 19% to 75%. When I saw that statistic, I was just kind of speechless. So I think it's so important to get good quality teachers working in schools to really try and narrow that gap.
Yeah, well, that's certainly a very sort of shocking statistic, and one that proves that really there is so much work to do. And then, you know, I guess it's not all bad. There's a lot of very good work being done, and although there may be concerns about how the national tutoring program is going to be implemented and how tutors themselves can actually take part in it and actually help and assist with those students who are attempting to, as they say, catch up. It is a very positive step, and it shows that at least, you know, there are big players in this field who have been working for years to make this happen, and that's finally coming to fruition. And now, a brief word from our founder, Julia Silva.
If you'd like to hear more about the ideas we touch on here, or gain the tools to take your own tutoring to the next level, the Qualification for Tutors could be for you. This live online seminar is facilitated by industry experts who, over 4 Zoom workshops, will cover the foundations of teaching and learning and how it relates to you as a tutor. The workshops are full of rich discussions where you'll learn alongside other tutors and connect on a professional level. We will teach you how to be the kind of tutor every child remembers. Visit our community space at qualifiedtutorcommunity.org and sign up now for our transformative course. We'll see you there.
Just to finish, Eli, I'd love to unpick your brain just one final time on what do you think are the top 3 tips for tutors in this time at the moment? So considering kind of all the factors of tutoring in this period and heading into this strange summer that we'll be having.
Yes, before I approach that question, I would love to actually just go back for a second and just to mention, I think the Qualified Tutor Qualified Tutor program really will allow those university students that might not have ever actually considered tutoring in the first place to feel confident to take on that role. I know for me, if I hadn't been given the confidence to teach by Teach First, I would not necessarily have considered a career in teaching. So to be able to kind of be taught the ropes before going in to tutor, I think that will encourage definitely new tutors to get involved with tutoring at this time when tutoring is so crucial. So my top 3 tips for educators. My first would be to celebrate the positives. So there's going to be a lot of negativity around, as we've probably discussed a fair bit in this podcast. But I think there's also, as you said as well, a lot of opportunities in this time. So it's all about, I suppose, the well-being of the student and also the tutors or teachers. And it's kind of that mentality to stop blaming ourselves for events that really just are outside our control. I think sometimes it's easy to kind of beat ourselves up about students that are losing out because of this crisis, and everything has suddenly become quite daunting. Like just hearing the word unprecedented that's been like hurled into our everyday vocabulary, and just the concept that this challenge has never really faced educators before. It's such a overwhelming thought. However, I think it's really important to move away from all that doom and gloom sometimes, and to look at the small wins of these situations. So for me, I think a small win is a student that possibly hadn't sent in work for weeks, possibly because they didn't have access to a laptop. And this happened recently, actually. I received a message from a student saying, "I'm really sorry, sir. I just didn't have the access to the laptop. I've just got it." And they've just sent me streams of work. And I think that's something really, really positive for me. I had a boy recently who I've taught for a while. Whenever he used to come into the classroom, he would write the date and the title and then put his pen down for the rest of the 50 minutes. And every single lesson, it was the same. And last week, even though he's been in lockdown for however long, he decided to write a paragraph. I mean, it sounds like a small thing, but for me, I was shocked. I was thinking, this is the first time he's written a paragraph, and this is during a global pandemic. So imagine we can write not during a global pandemic. There's just so many of these small wins that I think can be celebrated, and I think it doesn't always have to feel like we're Sisyphus rolling a boulder up a hill. I think sometimes we can see the positive in a situation and see these as opportunities. My second tip would be to make use of online resources as much as possible. I think that's something we mentioned before. But just to reiterate, use Google Classroom, use Edpuzzle, Seneca Learning. These are all resources which are not lazy alternatives to creating personalized teaching resources, where you kind of have to spend hours deciding whether I want green or blue, or use Calibri or Times New Roman. I think these are like resources which we should embrace. They are going to cut down our work time, and for a good reason as well. So I think we should embrace them for the idea that they provide for us clear quantitative data that can be analyzed, and also because they use spaced repetition, for example, a lot of them, which is a great way to embed things within students' memories, which is something which is for teachers can be quite difficult to do within the classroom. So I think it's definitely something we should see as a positive, and to really embrace those online resources. And my final tip would be to just really be patient and understanding with the students. I think that was something that was really emphasized on the Qualified Tutor course. The idea that students are just at such a crucial stage of their development, and they're presented with such a challenge like this, it's going to have vast implications on their development and on their mental health. And it's almost like a nation has experienced this trauma, and they're obviously going to be suffering from some form of post-traumatic stress, some of them. And I think it's really important for us to realize this, and to really spend the time to ensure that the students' well-being is a priority. Because in my opinion, I think student well-being is a really important prerequisite to student learning. And I think without the well-being, the learning can't really take place. And I think that was something that was really, really emphasized on the Qualified Tutor course. And I think that was such an important message to take home. So thank you.
Well, thank you for effectively selling our course just there, Ellie. That was beautifully tied into those top three tips. Was a comparison and an appreciation kind of what we cover, and of the values that we hold true for education. And it's clear that you share those same values, and you share that same ethos of teaching. So I think there's really so much in there for teachers, for tutors, for those involved in the education industry, but not in either of those two categories, as well as a real kind of assessment on how tutors can navigate the current climate and how they can utilize EdTech and online learning as best they can. So there's really calling on the work that you've done in the past year, but also our understanding really of the current situation, and in the positions that we are in, we are well placed to comment on the effects that has on students and on educators. So thank you very, very much for joining us, Eli. It's
thank you for having me, Ludo.
Yeah, it's
always great to chat.
Yeah, it's brilliant to have met you on this course, Eli, and I really think that there is a lot that we can learn from each other as educators, but also as learners. So there's constantly been sharing readings and articles, and long may that continue, both between us, but also kind of on our qualified tutor community space that we have recently launched that will allow that continuous conversation to happen post workshop, but also in and around the sessions that we deliver. So I hope those listening have enjoyed kind of the discussion we've had there. Stay tuned for much more of the same. We'll be speaking to as many of the course alumni as we can, because it's amazing to hear their voice and amazing to hear where our participants have come from in order to inspire others further. So hopefully we will have the rest of the Teach First programme on the course before long, or perhaps that's a touch ambitious. But thank you very much, Eli, and we will speak again very soon. Thanks for listening to the Qualified Tutor podcast, where tutors share their expertise to support the tutoring community. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join our Qualified Tutor community at www.qualifiedtutorcommunity.org, or find it in the show notes below. We exist to connect, share, and learn with you, because tutoring is a small job that makes a big difference.